Hey, this is Regina White Favors with a new series. The series is titled What Do You Bring to the Table? And it is part of the Overcoming Rebound Relationships curriculum and then also the Toxic Encounters books. And you can find those tabs marked as rebounding and also toxic encounter books on my website, reginawhitefavors.com. So, this particular series I thought is very interesting because there's this sort of ongoing social media discussion concerning men asking women what do they bring to the table, and it segues into conversations about submission and how most men want a submissive wife or partner. They're not always inclined to transition the individual into becoming a wife, but they want the individual or the woman to be submissive. And so it has transitioned into those types of discussions of submission and also tradition, that they want a traditional wife. And many people define tradition or a traditional wife as someone who cooks and cleans and stays at the house. They tend to be a housekeeper, homekeeper, a housewife. But I noticed that there's an irony to the discussion about what do they bring to the table, because most men who ask that question tend to label themselves or categorize themselves as alpha men, and they still, when a woman responds with the fact that she makes a certain income or she works a certain job or she has education, the men will say, well, that's not important to alpha men, right? Or that's not important to men just in general. And the irony that I find very interesting is that these men want a traditional submissive wife, but they also want her to work. They don't want the 50s, 40s, 50s type of wives who stayed home where the man went out and he was the breadwinner. What they want is still the woman to work and still the woman to be able to tend to the home, tend to the husband in a very traditional way, not have any true independence or anything like that. But when a woman says, well, she makes a certain amount of money or she has education, they sort of mock and scorn and look down on that. So I've been thinking about this series for a good while and just kind of listening to discussions and being sort of turned off by those discussions, as well as wondering, I mean, do people really know what they want? The most important thing that people need to understand is that you are always 100% responsible for yourself. So that means you need to do all that you need to do to ensure that you establish you. Just because someone decides to get an education or make a lot of money doesn't mean that they think that person is better than you. That's what you're supposed to do as an adult. You're supposed to leave your parents' home, get a job, go to school, get your own apartment, get a house, get a car, pay bills. That's what you're supposed to do. And so this discussion about what do you bring to the table is something that I want to explore. I don't know if I'm going to turn it into a script or something, but I have created a workbook companion that I'm going to introduce you to in a few slides. So this is what do you bring to the table, and this is preparing your table for engagement. And your table for engagement depends on where you are in your development. If you are preparing your table for engagement, if you are in your 30s or your 40s, well, it is, you've likely already received your education or completed your education, and so now you are already establishing yourself. So now you are at a 30s mindset, or if you're in your 40s, you're at a 40s mindset. So how you perceive the world and how you engage with another person is going to be a lot different than the person who is in their 20s, right? So preparing your table means whatever it means in terms of the particular topics we're going to discuss, but also just your table in terms of your mindset. your mentality about relationships, about relationship building. If you're the type of person who quits relationships after a certain time and you don't have a record of staying in a relationship longer than 6 months, that is your table. And so you're going to have to really address that part of your um, emotional development. So this is, what do you bring to the table? Preparing your table for engagement. So the curriculum is based upon the research I did for rebounding and rebound relationships. And that research you can find under the rebounding tab. And the rebound relationship research focuses on understanding the table. So this is the table that we're at as two partners. One of the partners is a rebound, and the other partner is a member of a core relationship. And so when you are engaging in relationships, especially romantically, and you don't know that the partner is already engaged with someone else, and that can be as in marriage, or it can be just in a long-term relationship, it's time to really think about what's going on with the table that you're sitting at. So that's understanding the table. And then the Toxic Encounters books um, do derive from that research. And so I go over that at the end of the presentation here. But it's Overcoming Rebound Relationships curriculum, and it is when you need to leave the table. So the three books, three titles under the series, the Bait, Hook, and Switch series, focus on rebound relationships, why people pursue them, focuses on also adult attachment, and then encourages the reader to go no contact. So this is the curriculum in addition to the workbook companion. So here's the workbook companion. What do you bring to the table? This is the series, and then this is taking many of the ideas that I have in this presentation and putting it into book form. So it's about 130 pages, and it is available on Amazon. So, what do you bring to the table series? What is the table? And this is something that you want to think about when you are preparing your table for engagement. What is the table that you're sitting at? It's very it's interesting to me how we engage in relationships, or we engage in encounters, but we haven't really established the relationship itself, right? Somehow we are just adjacent to each other, and I guess we are going out, and I guess we're calling each other, and I guess we are talking to each other longer than 30 minutes, and sometimes we share food, and if we are sexually active with each other, we do that. Sometimes we meet up at the house, or his house, or our house, my house, and we watch TV, we watch a movie, but we haven't really established what the table is. We're just going out. And one person's perception, the person might think, especially a woman might think, that this is actually a relationship. Whereas in the male's perception, the man's perception, he might think this is just a situationship, that this is what we do. We're not really in a relationship. We're just kind of like doing something, right? And so I think really asking the hard questions about what the table is, what are we sitting at? What type of table are we sitting at? Are we a friends with benefits table? Or are we just a living situation type table? Am I a rebound in this relationship type table? Or are we just merely friends type table? Or are we bros and sis and we're not really going to cross that line type table? Are we courting type table? Are we looking to move beyond what we are type table? What is, in other words, what is the table? There's a purpose for every table that you set. If you're setting the dining room table, you're going to have dining room furniture. You're going to actually have a dining room table. You're going to have place settings. You're going to have decorative uh, types of dishes. There's going to be a person at the head of the table. There's going to be a person, there are going to be other people who sit at the table. They may all be related. They may not be related. They all may be friends. But the table is defined by the purpose of the table. And so if you have a table in your garage, that table might be just for um, crafts, any type of uh, things that you put on it to fix the car, like in the table, or to fix the garage, right? There's a purpose for the table in the garage. There's a purpose for the table if you are a seamstress, right? You're going to sew some clothes, so you prepare your table, you set it up so that you can work on it. Sometimes instead of using a desk, a traditional desk, I tend to use a table for a desk, because I want the desk to be very long and I want it to be wide enough for me to do what I want to do. And I have two tables in my house. I have one is for the office, and then one that's for the office being for a teacher, and then one is for my entrepreneurial planning, small business planning. And so those two, I keep those two tables separate, because one is truly dedicated for planning my teaching lessons, reading, research, things like that. And the other table is truly dedicated to the books that I write, the how I set it up, how I want to visit conferences, what I want to do, the logos, all that kind of stuff, right? And so I gave a purpose to each of those tables. Then I have a desk in my bedroom, and then I have another type of table. So understanding the table is very important, because you can be sitting at a table for so many years thinking that it's going somewhere, this relationship is going somewhere, and it hasn't gone anywhere. There have been people who have been in relationships for 10, 15 years with the same partner, and if you both agree that this is the way you want to go with a relationship, then that's fine. That's between you two. You have people who would never marry. Uh, you have couples who would never marry, even though they have been married before, but they are expecting the person that they are with now to co-sign and agree with their personal decision. And if that is not something that you want to do, then you're sitting at the wrong table. If you really want to get married, but the person that you're with is telling you, let's just wait, and that statement has turned in has transitioned from a moment to now 2 years to 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. You have been sitting at the wrong table. That person doesn't want to marry, and it doesn't always mean that the person doesn't want to marry you, and it could also mean that the person doesn't want to marry you. You can also be at a table where the person actually married you and didn't really want to marry you, but they married you because they needed a place to live. They two incomes are better than one, or they stayed together for the kids. They made a number of decisions based upon that one decision. Okay, well, I'm already at the table. I might as well stay at it, right? I might as well continue to eat from it and receive from it. But if that's not something that you want, then you're going to have to address your table, because again, you can be in a situation for many, many years and that not be the type of situation that you really truly wanted, and you wake up one day and you've been sitting at this table for many years, and now it's hard to let it go. Now it's hard to leave. So what is the table? That's something that you have to define for yourself. You have to get the courage and really ask the hard questions concerning the table you're sitting at. So then how do you prepare the table, right? So um, preparing the table begins with, I want to really say that preparing your table really begins in high school. that if we all did what we were supposed to do in high school in terms of planning, that we started to plan somewhere at the end of sophomore year to junior year, I think we would have fared a lot better. Um, because when you don't plan, you end up just taking anything. And I had that as an issue. I worked in high school. I did the co-op program where I worked half a day, and then I went to work for a company, Hunt Oil Company here, um, in Dallas, Texas. And so I got job experience for 2 years. However, I didn't really plan beyond those 2 years. I thought I was going to go to the military. It didn't work out, and I didn't have a plan B, a plan C, a plan D. I didn't have anything beyond that. So then now I'm forced to, I took some staffing jobs, some temporary agency type jobs that lasted for a good year or so. And then once those jobs end, you really don't have anything else. So now I'm sort of floating. I'm wondering. I don't know where I need to be. So sometimes you take jobs that are not really conducive to your individual success. You just need some money. And then somehow I happened on to a job where I could do customer service. And then somehow that transitioned into me doing retail. So what that basically says or suggests is that I didn't prepare the table. That sure, I knew I was going to graduate from high school. I should have had a plan, but we don't think like that. And our parents tend to sort of expect us to leave the house too early. So all that time that we wasted not planning, we're now forced to confront the world. And I've always been an advocate of maybe letting your child stay at the house until about 22, give or take 25, because I don't feel like you are truly an adult at 18. Of course, you always want to leave yourself. Uh, but preparing the table is essentially preparing for where you want to go. Where do you have now graduated from high school? Where do you want to take yourself? And if we all had the insight or the foresight before we graduated, I don't think we would really get into a lot of distractions. Now, some people do. What they do is they go on ahead and take the SATs, the PSATs. They do all of the stuff that they need to do. They turn in applications, and then that following fall they do go to college, or they go to junior college. That didn't register with me. That wasn't necessarily encouraged initially. It became something of a last resort. And so I wish I had had the insight about that. Now it's a lot that I don't really do a whole lot of regretting with my life, but preparing the table is something that I teach today. I don't call it that. What I call it is a 2-year transition plan. So even when I graduated from college with the master's degree, I didn't have a plan. When I graduated with the undergraduate degree, the bachelor's degree, it was obvious that I needed a plan. I mean, no, I'm sorry. It was obvious that I needed a master's degree to teach at the college level. So I didn't necessarily need a plan. I just needed to put in an application at a university, master's program, get in, do my 2 to 3 years, and go. But once I finished my master's degree, I didn't have a plan. I didn't prepare the table. And so even though the degree prepared me for where I needed to go, I still needed to prepare myself for where I needed to go. So when you are thinking about preparing the table, thinking about where you want to take yourself, where do you want to be, what do you want to become, and you begin to plan out those steps. Those are the types of assignments that I give out for my students, where I will have them to do an annotated bibliography of the schools that they are interested in transferring to, because I teach at the community college level, and then also an annotated bibliography entry of their intended career objectives, so that you know what's going on with your career now. So if a job announcement is asking for X amount of things, XYZ, in 2023, what do you think they're going to be asking for when you graduate in 2 to 4 years? And so putting them in the mindset of planning. So the how do you prepare the table is really just thinking about your life in 2-year increment transition planning. So you know that you have graduated from college, and you know that everyone has to pay their dues, do the entry level. And so then now that you have the job, where do you want to take yourself? Now let's learn about the company. Let's learn about the job. Okay. Or is there any way to advance, right? To a supervisor or manager level, what is required. So then you draw up your plan. You sit at the table and you prepare for where you prepare now for where you want to go, even in your job. You don't let things just happen. This is what happens with people who stay at a job for 25 years. They never plan for advancement, and then someone comes in off the street, takes the job in a year, they plan for advancement, and they actually do advance. And so then they say, the person who has the 25 years experience, well, I've been here all this time. Why didn't you move me up? And then the supervisor will say, yeah, but you never indicated that that's what you wanted to do. And so preparing your table really does take that sort of step by step, order by order, 2-year transition planning. So if you have a 5-year plan for whatever it is that you want to do, whether it is to get a house, whether it is to get an advanced degree, whether it is to move up in your career, do it. Take that as a 5-year plan, but chop it up into 2-year increments. And by the third year, you want to reassess and then confirm that in the next 2 years, you're going in the right direction, right? So how do you prepare the table? It all depends upon transition planning, 2-year transition planning, the type of table you do want to sit at later. There are different types of tables. There's a organization table, there's a political table, there's an advocacy table, there is wanting to become a senator table, uh, wanting to become a small business owner, an entrepreneur. There are all different types of tables. So how do you prepare your table? And this is something that you need to think about before you decide that you want to get into a relationship. What is your financial table is one of those types of questions that we really do need to ask ourselves um, repeatedly, consistently, persistently. It is not something that we say, okay, I just want to save some money, or I want to build an emergency fund. That's the start of a financial table. That is not the end all be all. Uh, Say, for instance, you set the financial table to save 3 months worth of emergency fund, whatever that dollar figure is. So that dollar figure is based upon what you make every month and based upon the type of emergency. So you would have to define the emergency. If the emergency is to make sure that you have your rent for the next month now, right? Or your rent for the next 2 or 3 months now, just in case there's a problem with your hours on your job, right? Okay, then you're going to take a certain amount out of your paycheck every paycheck, put it off to the side, and then by the end of 3 months, you will have at least your first month extra rent. That means that your financial table is going to have boundaries. It's going to have standards, boundaries, and expectations. So, for example, if your rent is $1,200 and you're trying to save 1,200 times three for 3 months, 3,600, and then you manage at the end of the first 3 months to save that 1,200, and then another 3 months you save another 1,200, etc. Then when someone comes to you and asks you for some money, you don't have it. Because if that's the goal, if that is your financial table to establish a 3 month savings, emergency savings, which represents your rent, then you don't have it. Because anything could happen between the time that you start that savings goal and the time you save. And so anyone who's coming to you and asking you for money, you may have an extra $1,200, but that doesn't mean that you actually have an extra $1,200. That means you have your extra rent. And so when you're looking at your financial table, especially before you engage romantically with someone, you do have to build good sound financial habits. You can't be a person who gives just because someone calls. Because if you decide to get into a relationship, a romantic relationship, whether it's live in or married, you can't take money, you can't expect to be single while married with your money. You can't expect to give a certain amount of money every month like you to a person like you did when you were single while you're now married, because the money has to go into the household. And so if you're not ready to um, transition your financial table from single to married, then you would need to reassess whether or not uh, you have the appropriate, financial table for you. Sometimes it could be that you just don't make enough money or something, right? Or sometimes it can be that you don't feel like you should have to share in the finances. Well, that's not going to work when you actually get married, because you are coming together as one. You are engaging and transitioning from engagement to marriage as one, and you have to bridge your finances as one. And so there are only two people in a marriage. Despite what many people say about marriage, there are only two people in a marriage. And so that means you're going to have to set boundaries with family members who have always been able to depend upon you for a few extra dollars when you were single. That is no longer, singlehood is no longer your financial table, or it would no longer be your financial table. Um, the way you spent when you were single, maybe you spend too much money on, credit cards, or you spend too much money on clothes or something like that. I still think you can buy clothes. You may have to choose your battles. So your financial table, whereas you were able to have a budget of $500 a month on clothes just for you as a single individual, that financial table is going to have to change for a person who's married, because then you are sharing the financial load when it comes to clothes. You are sharing the financial load when it comes to bills. You are sharing the financial load when it comes to other types of responsibilities. And then if you add kids on top of that, or if you add any sort of health problems on top of that, then that financial table is going to need to bear that type of weight. So when you're thinking about your financial table, there's a single financial table, there's a single to married financial table, that transition, and then there is a married married to married financial table, meaning that you're already married. And so whatever ideas, thinking that you had prior to that relationship, you're going to have to now really um, bridge what it means to sit at the financial table together. And if you're not ready to do that, then don't engage a relationship. Don't move in with a partner and bridge your finances, and you both are not financially stable. Two financially unstable people do not make one financially stable person. You both need to go through the process of learning about your individual financial tables, what's going on with you individually, why you are not saving money, why you're not making enough money, why you don't have enough money to come together as two married people. You have to look at your own individual respective financial tables before you can now come together as a collective, right? So what is your financial table? What is your family table? So your family table is one of those things that has a lot to do with the upbringing, your parents' parenting style, what you were exposed to. So if you were exposed to a person and a parent who sort of wrote bad checks and that was modeled to you, you're likely to pick up that habit, because a lot of times a person who does that tries to involve you in it. And when you do it the very first time, write a bad check, right, and get away with it, you feel a certain release from that. Okay. But in that regard, you're not learning what you need to learn about how to handle money within the family dynamic. What you're learning is how someone has learned how to mismanage money within the family dynamic. Your family dynamic is really your first world, and that world prepares you for the outside world, right? And so if you live in that world and that world is chaotic, and you see your father hit your mother, or you see your mother hit your father, or you see either one of those parents cheating on each other, or if you see either one of those parents bringing in another child outside of the marriage, right? Or if you see two loving parents, if you see parents who spent time loving their kids and learning their kids. Okay, that's the world you're learning. You're learning. That's a family table. One of the most important family table events that we have really sort of gotten away from is all of us sitting at the family table and actually eating a meal, talking to each other. Sometimes we're all quiet and sometimes we're not. But there's the head of the house, I mean, the head of the table. Uh, that person is sitting at the head of the table, and then you have all of the siblings. You may have a grandmother, or an uncle, or a grandpa, or something like that. But we're all sitting at the table. Somehow, when I think the advent of the um, microwave, the TV dinners, I think that's what sort of shifted um, us away from the table, because when you think about it, we don't have any problems coming back to the table when it's for holidays. We have no problems with that. But then sometimes if you sit back and observe, you'll see certain people leave the table and actually sit by the TV, or sit outside, or sit in their lazy boy chair, or go to their room. And so we still have this family table where people are not sitting at the family table anymore. And I don't know if that really bothers you, if that's a concern for you. It may not be a concern for you. And I'm not quite sure if it is a concern for me, but I remember feeling a part of the family when we sat at the family table. And I remember the shift from that and feeling separate from the family when we did not sit at the family table. Now there were some other dynamics with the family table in terms of isolation, being scapegoated, feeling like the black sheep of the family, being treated like a problem. You have that family table as well. And so whatever family table you have been exposed to, whatever family dynamic you have been exposed to, if you don't have any awareness of the toxicity of that family dynamic, you are sure to take that family dynamic, the ideals and philosophies and policies and rules within that family dynamic at that family table, outside of that home and into your home. And you will find yourself isolated, not having too many friends. And if they do, they can't stay too long, right? Or if you have the type of family table where there's learning, there's teachable moments. The parents have an authoritative style where they grant autonomy, but they kind of monitor you, not from an authoritarian style, where you are forced to do what the parents want you to do because they say so, right? There's a difference between having a teachable moment in a situation and having a parent who says, do it because I said so. That's a family table. And if you find yourself saying those words to your child, or if you're a teacher like myself and you are saying it to your students, or if you are a manager at a company and you are saying it to your subordinate, okay, all you're doing is confusing the situation. You're telling someone to do it because you said so, but you're not really explaining why it's very important to do it because they say so, right? True, you do have the power and the authority to tell the person to do it, but it is very important that you sit down and explain to the person what's going on and why it is important. But if you don't learn problem solving at the family table, and all you learn at the family table is how problems are created and never solved, then you can expect to take that type of thinking into a relationship where, like a good example of this, many of you like myself have grown up in a family dynamic with a very emotional, maybe toxic mother, likely narcissistic, and that person can be very manipulative. And then if you don't do what the person says, they give you the silent treatment. Sometimes they will walk around the house slamming doors and things like that. And that's their prerogative because they are the parent. But whatever you see in your parent doing that, especially with the manipulation and silent treatment, you will find yourself doing it with your spouse, with your live-in partner, with your long-term partner. You'll find yourself doing exactly what has been modeled to you. So that family table matters. What you learn at the family table, and the family table is not, it can be specifically literally the family table, but it can also be the ideals that form and permeate the family dynamic, which can be toxic ideas or which can be very healthy ideas. So, what is your family table? What is your health table? Your health table is something that you want to think about. I made in the book, I made this comment. I created this comment that some men tend to play around so long in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and nearly 50s. And when it's time for them to settle down, now they need a nurse or a purse. And you'll see this also spread across social media that no one wants to become a hospice wife. No one wants to become a nurse for a man. No one wants to become his purse. And what that means is, or suggests, is that people wait too long to address health issues. And I mean it's very literally, and we all do this. I have a issue that I need to address that I have been putting off, and I'm not at the age where I can play around like that. And so now I'm going to have to make a decision to resolve that issue. It's not a major health issue, but it is a health issue. But what I find is that people wait too long to address health. One of the questions you got to ask your potential partner, because remember, you are preparing your table for engagement, is if that person is willing to, if that person is willing to take you on with your health issues. So, for instance, you could have a person who has struggled with cancer, or you can have a person who has struggled with diabetes, and as a result, they had to lose a limb, a leg or arm or something like that, right? You could have a person who is prone to have heart attacks. You can have a person who is prone to have mental health issues, right? I do discuss that as well. You can have a number of issues. When you have those issues, you are by default asking or expecting that person to take you on, because when you get married, you become responsible for each other. You don't necessarily become each other's parents, but you do become responsible for each other. There's no such thing as, okay, I'm not going to do that just because we're married. That it doesn't work that way. Once you decide to become married and become one, you are each other's person, point of contact, emergency call, representative, uh, anything that you could think of. And so it's not like you have one foot outside of the marriage and one foot in, like you're doing a hokey pokey or something like that. When you're in, you're all the way in. And when you're thinking about this your health table, you have to consider that the decisions that you're making now, whatever age you are at, the decisions that you're making now, someone will have to share in the burden of those decisions if you decide to get married or if you decide to live with a partner. I remember a situation with my stepfather and his wife, which I believe would become my stepmother, right? Um, um, they both started out at a certain job, and then somehow he got into trouble. He was just one of those types of people who wasn't going to stay on the job after a certain time, and he went on ahead and quit the job. So then the burden of the financial load was on her. He did get a disability check from a previous job that was sufficient to pay for his their living expenses, right, their shelter costs. But he wanted her to stay on that job because it was full time, and then it could fund some of the hobbies that he was doing. Well, there was stress at the job. She was kind of running herself down, and then one night she woke up coughing real bad, went into a coma. Ended up finding out that she actually had diabetes. She was in that coma for I don't know a good month. And there was just a lot of health issues, and then she came out partially blind. And so what the reason why I tell that story is because when you get with a certain partner, what kind of partner are you marrying? He was perfectly willing to let her work full time and he stay at home, which contributed to her working too much. At their ages, the type of job, it was too much on her um, physically, and then she was expected to be a wife at the house, and all that entails. And there was a lot of responsibility. There was a lot of some conflict. There was a lot going on within their dynamic. He couldn't work a job too long because of a previous disability, and he did do a little bit of a part-time job. But when you are thinking about the partner that you are going to marry, engage, and then marry, it is really important to understand how they think about the marriage and who's going to work and who's not going to work and how long we're going to work and how much work is too much work and what kind of funds do we have, can we take it easy. Many people are having to return to the workforce in their 60s, 70s, 80s because somehow they didn't plan in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. And so when you take on the task of working an 8-hour job and standing on your feet, that's going to affect your health, and it's going to exacerbate whatever type of situation you are already in health wise based upon your age. So if you got it in your mind in your 20s that I'm going to do better to ensure that I make the kind of money so I don't have to return to work in my 70s and 80s, which would exacerbate a current health type situation, then if I can be sure that I do that, then I will fare better. And when I actually retire, I can actually be retired. Having the health conversation, having the health foresight now, and making sure that you can make the kind of money so that you won't have to take on a certain type of grueling task is important. And we don't think like that because we think while we are in our 20s we are invincible, we move around, um, It's not that big of a deal, so I'll be okay. But we begin to feel our mortality in our 40s. That's when we realize that we can actually die. However, even though we know that we can die, I like to look at it like this: the typical retirement age is 65. So if you look at yourself, if you examine yourself at 40 years old and you look ahead at 65, that means you have 25 more years to turn it around for yourself. That's how I look at it. So that means you need to check your health. You may need to change your eating habits. You may need to exercise. But your health could also be your financial health, and making sure that you're making the kind of money and that you don't wait too long. You have people who have been a waitress for so many years, and they never went to school, they never advanced, they never moved beyond being a waitress. Nothing wrong with being a waitress, but now you're at a certain age and you can't make more than what you make as a waitress. And you don't have any education, you never got a certificate in something, you never did something beyond where you are. And so anything that you can do now, in your 20s, 30s, and 40s will be helpful for you health wise in your 50s, 60s, and 70s, possibly 80s, 90s as well. So, what is your health table? What is your mental table? So, your mental table, in terms of preparation for marriage, preparation for engagement and marriage, right, or just romantic relationship building, really is about truly mindset and whether or not you have the emotional regulation. If you feel like you need to fight with your partner, pull at your partner for attention, manipulate your partner, you have other type of traumas, triggers, psychological issues in other areas, it is not time to be in a relationship. It is just not time to be in a relationship, especially if you have been in a previous relationship and that relationship caused a lot of the issues that you are suffering through now. It's not time for relationship, because a new relationship is not going to heal you. You need to go through a healing process yourself. Your mentality, your mental could also extend to your mentality about relationships. We live in 2023. Women work. That's it. Women work. Women work inside the home, they work outside the home, they have businesses, they can be independent, they can buy their own homes. They are no longer the property of men. And that's not to make a feminist argument, because I am not a feminist. But it's hard for men in particular to understand that women work. But certain men tend to be of a mentality that women should stay at home, they should not have to work, but they still want the woman to contribute in some kind of way. They want the woman to be submissive and not make a whole bunch of money, but then um, be insecure and question the value of the woman when she makes a whole lot of money. That's weird, right? When you're thinking about the mentality for women, women in some ways think like men on the traditional idea. They expect men who are not their husbands to fund their lifestyle. There's nothing wrong with being a gentleman opening up the door, but I believe that both parties should go Dutch until there is a discussion at the table concerning where we're going to take the relationship. There's nothing wrong sometimes with taking each other out. Okay, we're going to the fair, we're going to a restaurant, I'm going to treat. And that is just, it could be treating for their birthday or something like that. But as a general rule, if you're not married, that person is not responsible for you financially. Sure, it might stroke a man's ego for a woman to ask her to pay for something, but the way I have heard some women talk, they have this kind of mentality that he needs to work a certain job, he needs to have a certain figure, he needs to be tall, right? And he needs to make six figures. It just X amount of things. And the first question that I ask to myself, and sometimes comments on social media, I ask, well, do you already make that money yourself? The very thing that you're asking of someone, have you met your own minimum? Do you make that kind of money? Okay, he has to have a house, he has to have this, he has to that. Okay, but do you have that yourself? Because relying on another person in 2023, we're not in 1940s, 1930s, 40s, 50s. We're not in that time period anymore. We're in 2023. And asking a man to take on a traditional role as a pseudo husband before you actually become married, to me, is unfair. You are projecting a certain mentality onto what is essentially two people coming together and eating at Burger King, right? You're not married. You don't have the mindset of marriage. You don't have the mentality of marriage. So, what is your mental table? Is thinking about, okay, if you know for certain that this person is a person that you want to marry, that you want to be with, then plan for that. Go ahead and plan for that. Go ahead and be in that mindset. Go ahead and be in that mentality. Go ahead and be in that mental space. But if that is not the mental space, why pull at someone and ask for someone to do husband things and wife things when you're not in that mindset, when you're not in that mental? Of course, mental could also mean mental health as well. That could also expand to mental health. If you have major depressive episodes, marriage may not work for you right now. Therapy might work for you a lot better, so that you know how to manage those major depressive episodes or any other type of mental health issue, so that you know how to address it as an individual. Because once you get into a marriage, is only going to the marriage may not complicate your mental health issues, but it's definitely going to call attention to it when you are confronted with conflict. Do you know how to resolve conflict? So if you prepare your mental table for resolving conflict, there are X amount of conflicts that you are always going to confront as an individual adult. And so you don't need marriage to substitute for conflict resolution. Marriage is not going to be a conflict resolution for you when your issue is an individual problem. Because if you never got married, which you do, you still need to solve that individual problem. Yes. And so what is your mental table? And in terms of understanding how to prepare your table for engagement, is the mentality that you need to really think about and address. If you have aunts and your mother and aunts pushing you into marriage, but they're not telling you the reason why you should marry or why you need to marry, okay, all they're doing is repeating a pattern that their mothers and their mothers before them did. But then look at your mother and look at your aunt and ask yourself, are they happy? What is their mental state, concerning their marriage? What is their mental state about marriage? What is their mental state about the husband that they have to serve, sleep with, love, pray for? What is their mental? Are they even happy? The very people I notice who push you into a relationship too soon are the very people who tend to be unhappy. But on the other side of this, I know that there was this one person, she would push a lot of people into relationships, including myself, but all of those other relationships, they never made it. They never made it. Those folks are divorced. She's the only one who has been married to her partner happily for many, many years. And I thought that is so weird, right? So people, you have to compare your mentality with that other person's mentality, but your mentality should be the one that takes priority. No one outside of you should push you into anything. Really, the end of the day, it is you pushing you into something. No one makes you do anything unless someone kidnaps you, holds a gun to your head, forces you into something illegal or something like that by shooting you, or um, threatening to shoot you. You still exercise your free will, even if the person is threatening to shoot you and you decide to do it. That's still you exercising your free will. So your mentality, your mental table always goes back to your decisions, your free will decisions, your your decision to change or not change, your decision to continue to stay in a certain mindset about a particular issue, or to change your mindset about that particular issue. You can be on a hamster's wheel and don't even know it. You can be walking in the wilderness of a particular issue and not even know it. So, what is your mental table? Can two walk together unless they agree table? And that's a very important thing because that's a biblical reference here. And it's Amos 3:3. Can two walk together unless they agree? And it's just essentially, if you look at it from the spiritual terms, biblical terms, basically, uh, God is, suggesting don't be unequally yoked with unbelievers, right? Uh, why would a person who is a Christian marry a person who is a Muslim? Sure, you have people who think, democratically, that we're all free to marry whoever we want to marry. However, God thinks, theocratically, right? We may be, democratic. He's theocratic. And so, however God defines marriage in terms of how the two parties are going to come together, is all based upon the tenets of the Bible in terms of walking together unless they agree. Um, Now, put that off to the side just for a minute. I may return to it. If we have two people in a relationship, say we have two people in a marriage, and hopefully they got this clear before the marriage. We have one person who wants kids, and then we have one person who does not want kids. Okay, and suppose we say one of the partners voiced their concern prior to marriage. Usually, it can be a male, it could be the husband, I mean, the man, or it could be the woman. But let's just say it's the man. He says he doesn't want to have kids. Okay. And so then you get into the marriage, you really do want to have kids, and you claim that you're going to respect his wishes, but somehow you decide to not take your birth control, or um, something happens with another contraception or something like that, and then you end up having a child, or you get pregnant and you tell him and you're happy and he's not happy. And now you are offended because now you're in this mindset, okay, so you don't want my child, you don't want our child, this is our child, we made this child together. But he already told you at the beginning, prior to the marriage, that he didn't want to have kids. He didn't necessarily have to give you a reason why he didn't want to have kids. He just said he didn't want to have kids. So then why put him in that position to now abandon a child? You can't play victim and say, yeah, but that's different. How we thought back then was different. Now the child is here. He's responsible. Sure, by court, by law, he would definitely be responsible, but that's unfair. So you knew before the marriage that you wanted to have kids, and you knew before the marriage that he didn't want to have kids. And if you two were not in agreement before marriage, why did you get married? You shouldn't have gotten married. What you should have done was grieve that relationship, exit the relationship, grieve it, wait, get some healing, get some therapy, and wait for the right partner the person who actually wants to have kids. That's it. It is very simple. As much as we like to say it is not that simple, and you can't help who you love, and things could change. And no, you walked in disagreement from the beginning. You can't get into the marriage and say, "Oh, you changed. Oh, things have changed now. Let's accept this child." Oh, I believe a person who says they never wanted a child will always have that at the back of their heart, even if the child born and the person who didn't want the child looks into the child's eyes, holds the baby, and learns to love the baby. I still think on some level that person, that parent, newly parent who didn't want to be a parent, is going to resent that child, and is going to resent you. And somewhere down the road, there's going to be a division. There's going to be conflict, and someone is going to leave the relationship. It is better to walk in agreement before you get into that relationship or that marriage. You don't wait until you get into the relationship to walk in agreement. If you two do not agree on a particular really vital, substantial area of marriage, then you should rethink your decision to marry. Now, if you rethought your decision to marry, you separated from each other, and you went your way and he went his way, and then 2 years later he has a change of heart, and not because he's trying to get you back, but he just has a change of heart. He's now ready. Okay, that's different. Now you are walking in agreement. But if you try to make someone do something, they're always going to resent you, and they're always somehow, in their resenting you, they have now created a foot out of the relationship, and they may take vengeance, they may retaliate. The person might decide to go and have an affair with someone else as a way of teaching you a lesson, and also as a way of punishing you for making them become something that they didn't want to do. They didn't want to become that, and you're trying to make them. There's nothing worse. There's nothing worse than a partner in a relationship, in a marriage with you, who is miserable from the very beginning. And you don't know that the person is miserable. You don't really know that. Somehow they put on a face, they put on an actor's face, and sometimes you can go out to eat. You can go to Applebee's, you can go to Denny's, you can go to the fair, you can go to a number of things. But on the inside of them, the person always feels like you made them do something that they didn't want to do. I had a certain situation with an ex, and he refused to let go of his relationship with his ex, even though she let him go, moved him out. They were all already broken up. She was trying to come back and forth into our relationship, and he just wouldn't let her go. And it wasn't until after I had to make a final decision about the relationship and let him go for good that I realized we were never in agreement. It didn't matter that we had sex. It didn't matter that I cooked food for him. It didn't matter that we went to the grocery store. It didn't matter that we went to little outings, to the movies, talked, laughed, uh, did other types of things, called each other. It didn't matter. He was never in agreement with the relationship that he had with me. His heart was always with the woman who didn't want him. and and it would have been better to leave him alone. When I found out he was still talking to her, let time pass by, and possibly later, if he was ready, come back into the relationship with me. But he was never he we were never in agreement. And I remember seeing him sit at a desk in the house, in a previous house. And I just looked at him, and something about him just really bothered me or turned me off, and I didn't know what it was. And it wasn't until maybe a year or so out of the relationship, out of the situation, that I realized he was miserable. He didn't act like he was miserable in terms of uh, emotional. He kept his emotions, regulated or whatever. But when I think about and reflect on the situation, he was miserable. It doesn't necessarily mean that I caused misery, that I was miserable to be with. It's just that we never were in agreement. He never wanted to be in relationship with me. He wanted to be in relationship with her, and he was using me to soothe and calm and as a distraction, and then and have to say as a rebound, until she decided that she was going to come back around, and she never did. And so then he felt stuck. And once you have a person who feels stuck and feels like they have to accept the situation, and he could have made a decision to leave. He is still 100% responsible as an adult, but he didn't have any plans himself. So then he had to stay with me. And then here it is. I'm walking and thinking that we're in agreement and that we're going somewhere, and we're just basically on a hamster's wheel. We're not going anywhere. We're everywhere and nowhere at the same time. And once I realized that he was never going to let go of that situation, I had to let him go. So then getting out of disagreement with him brought agreement with myself, that I had to prioritize myself. I had to set better standards, boundaries, and expectations for myself and with myself. And from that situation, I'm still now undergoing my healing process. And so now my agreement is with me, and with what God thinks of me, and what God wants for my life, and what God believes is best for me. And it's better for me, as I walk in agreement with that I wait, that I continue to work on my tables, whatever those tables are. Those are your financial tables, health tables, mental, all those different types of tables, that I continue to work on those tables, and that I fully endure and overcome and recover from the situation, so that I no longer walk in disagreement with people who don't want to be with me. That's a hard story to tell, and I actually tell it in multiple books in different types of ways. But can two walk together unless they agree is something that you really have to have the courage to make the decision about, because again, you can be in situations uh, that are no longer working, that are completely dysfunctional, but you're trying to make dysfunction functional, and it's never going to work. It's never going to work. Eventually that person is going to leave. Eventually that person, something on the inside of that person is just going to turn on. It's like a light switch. It's just going to turn on, and they're going to leave. I had a previous situation that I know. I didn't have this situation, but I know of a person. I don't want to name the person, but one day her partner, who is now her ex-partner, just decided to come home one day, come to her house, her apartment, come home one day, pack all his stuff, and leave. And what that tells me is that he never really intended to stay in a relationship. So that means they were never in agreement. He goes and marries someone else many, many years later, uh, and he gets hurt on the job, and then uh, that person decides to visit him in the hospital only once and never came back. So he left one person to be with another person, and that person decided to leave him. And then many years later, because of his heart from the previous types of situations, he does exactly to a new person what he did to a previous person, what another person did to him. So now we have all of these different tables in disagreement, because people don't know how to make a decision and stand by, have the courage to make the decision. If I have to lose out on this what I believe is an opportunity I'm just going to have to lose because we're not walking in agreement. I had another situation. I know another situation where the two people were going to come together, and then there was a separation, and then one person was crying over the other. And even though I feel like the person called that that other person, tried to get the relationship back, and then they end up married, but then they ended up divorced because the person, like my ex, was miserable. He didn't want to be in a relationship, or he was not ready for a relationship at that time, and that he needed time. And maybe if he had had the time that he needed for himself, by the time he met that person, he would have been still in that relationship, in marriage, 10, 15, 20 years on down the road. So can two walk together unless they agree? I really that's a very hard question to ask. That's a question that will cause you to cry. There's a question that will cause you to really contemplate your purpose in life, especially if you don't get what you want. Here it is, you want this woman over here, but somehow things are not working out, it's not coming together, it's not gelling. You think that your heart is enough um for it to for the relationship to work, and it's just not going to work. It's just not. No matter what you do, you can pray it, you can sex the person, you can do all that you can. You can have all the money in the world. Tom Brady and Giselle Bundchen uh, finally divorced, right? And so, of course, they have all the money in the world, but she wanted him out of the NFL and she wanted him more at home, right? So that they can come together as a family. Well, he decided that he would be more miserable outside of the NFL, and I don't know if he would have been miserable at home, but he wasn't ready to let go of the NFL. And I like to caution, well, you knew when you married him he was an NFL player, so why would you think that you're going to change that in him, right? As long as a person can throw that ball, run down that field, especially men, they're going to do it until they're laid out on the field, right? Um, so a lot of times we get into these relationships expecting the person to change, like the current situation with Kevin Costner and his wife. Okay, she wanted him to quit one of the highest rated TV shows that just put him back on the map. She wanted him to quit that, but he's an actor, and you knew that when you got with him that he's an actor. Well, you can say the same thing about the two men that I mentioned, Brady and Costner. Well, you knew the types of women were the types of women who would rather you be at home. They want the money that you have. They want the status and prestige that you have, but they still want you home. And so if you have to get that straight early and not let people lie to you and say, "Oh, I'm okay with your career. Everything's all right. I got you." Don't let people lie to you. If they are not okay with your career, with what you're doing, you have to have the heart to tell yourself that, because no one can really do you wrong. Only you can do yourself wrong. And if you are putting yourself in situations where it is not conducive for you mentally, health wise, career wise, you're going to resent that person, you're going to be miserable with that person, um, and it's not going to fare well for you. And some situations that you put yourself in, they can do some real damage to you. That person, being connected to that person, can do some damage to you. Being connected in that relationship in a hostile, conflict ridden, toxic uh, uh, family environment can do some damage to you. When I finally, right before I got out of the situation with the ex, and I found out that he had cheated one more time before the very last time I made the decision, I was standing at the gate of the place we were living in, and I just needed to I just needed to take some time. I finished the conversation with her over the phone. She had called me to tell me that she was still sleeping around with my so-called man, and I got off the phone with her, and I stepped outside, and I walked down to the end of the apartment place, and I stood at the gate, like the backyard gate or something, and I kid you not, I felt my breath leave me. I felt breath leave me. Not like in a typical sigh, not like in typical inhale, exhale. It's like I opened my mouth and breath left me. And I knew that I was going to have to get out of that situation. And I didn't know how I was going to have to get out of the situation. But the fact that we were never in agreement in the first place contributed to the health issues that I would have later in the situation, and then contributed further to the the breath leaving me. And then once I got him out for good, when people say there's a thin line when it comes to your mind, your sound mind and insanity, I felt like my mind, if I didn't catch it, I felt like my mind was almost leaving me. And that's such a hard, when I say that, I don't even, sometimes I'm not even sure if I really truly understand what I'm saying. But I felt like my mind, and I had to catch it. It's like I had an awareness. You know how some people, you'll see someone who's having like a mental health episode, and they're doing a strange laugh, like this strange kind of laugh that's coming out of them. That's the way it felt. Like my mind was on its way to leaving itself, and I had to realize what was going on and catch it before it did. And that began the journey towards staying out of those types of relationships. Staying out, I should never have been in it in the first place. It was never what I was supposed to be in. And it took some time. And now that situation ended in 2016. We're in 2023. It is now in 2023 that I am actually entering a healing process. That I'm actually that I am committed to a healing process, a true healing process, that I'm not willing to engage in any more relationships of any kind until I get healed, until God heals me, until God heals my broken understanding. And your the healing is about your your broken understanding about something, your distorted vision. Why are you staying in relationships that no longer serve you? Why are you staying in relationships that are detrimental to your psyche? Why are you staying in relationships that are abusive, that can kill you, that you have stayed too long beyond your grace? Why are you still staying in those relationships? You are no longer in agreement, in the sense that you don't want to be treated that way. But when you think about it, if you're still staying in those relationships when they are detrimental, and your life is at stake, then you are walking in agreement with the way that person is treating you. Because if someone hits you, and this is not blaming the victim, but if someone hits you and you don't fight back, or accept the hit, or challenge the hit, or try to address it or something like that, and you continue to stay in that type of relationship, you are walking in agreement with that person hitting you. It was something like an Ike Turner interview that he gave about when he used to hit Tina Turner. He would say, "Oh, she was looking so sad, and so I would hit her to get her happy." Well, she stayed in that relationship many, many years until she had to make the decision that she no longer wanted to be in agreement with his choice of domestic violence towards her. He looked at it, his perception of the relationship was one perception, that I needed to make her happy. So the way that I need to make her happy is to hit her. And her perception of the relationship was he keeps hitting me and I'm not happy. That's why I'm truly not happy, because he keeps hitting me. And so once she came to an understanding, whatever that understanding is for her, once she came to an understanding about that and she made a decision to exit and leave, that's when she began to be in agreement with herself. She walked out of agreement with him and she walked in agreement with herself, and any other thing that she did. And so, can two walk together unless they agree? Is something that you truly have to address with yourself. You do have the right to set life plans and boundaries with yourself, but you don't have the right to manipulate somebody as you set your life boundaries and plans. If a, Going back to the kid situation, if a person does not want to have kids, and I'm not talking about the people the men who go and have sex with you, they don't tell you in the beginning that they don't want to have kids, but then they go and have sex with you, and then you get pregnant, and then all of a sudden they say they don't want to have kids. I'm not talking about those people. That's manipulation. That's just straight evil. I'm talking about the people who have had a conversation with you at the very beginning prior to the marriage. They said they did not want to have kids. You both had a conversation at the table. Whether you were eating at a restaurant, whether you were eating at the house, it doesn't matter. You had the conversation. The person said to you that he or she does not want to have kids. You cannot make that person then want to become a parent. So when that person tells you that and um, is very disappointing to you, then you're going to have to take you and your disappointment and exit that relationship, because you are no longer in agreement. Because down the road, at the end of the road, if you force that situation into a marriage and then you end up having a kid and something happens, I don't think you're really going to keep that relationship. You can be married 25 years and something shuts off in the person in the 26th year and you divorce. It happens all the time. I truly never understood people who've been married 35, 40 years, 59 years, and then they divorce in the 59th year. And I think to myself, well, you might as well go over to the 60th year. And if you go over to the 60th year, then maybe you'll stay together for 61, 62, 63. But no, because whatever understanding that they had in the beginning, they didn't get a very good understanding. It's like the people who stay together for the kids. And then once the kids leave and go to college, they go on ahead and separate and divorce. Okay, well, why is it that you stay together? You might divorce then. And I understand they stayed together for the kids. But if you would have gotten a good understanding and not tried to get married to leave your parents' house, or try to get married because this man has a job and you didn't have the job, or get married because you wanted uh, a person with a house or something. Okay, if you make the decision and say, you know what, he doesn't want to get married. There's no sense in us staying in a relationship because I really want to get married. If you make that decision, you will fare better. You will hurt for a while, but you will fare a lot better. So I'm gonna stop here because I can really go on with this. But can two walk together unless they agree? Table is the one that is probably next to the financial table that deserves a lot more time at the table. That deserves a lot. I cannot stress that enough. That deserves a lot more conversation at the table, so that you know that you both have a connection, that you're both compatible, and that you both have the same understanding about the marriage or the things or who we are and how we're going to bring our finances together, and what purpose we're going to serve and what life assignment, that you are in agreement. And the agreement, if you are a Christian, Bible believing Christian, is always going to be that sort of triangle: is God top, um, and I forgot what it's called. It's threefold marriage or something like that. But and it's not only going to be the triangle, but hierarchical, right? So God over husband, husband over wife, and so that too is one of those types of questions about agreement, about um, obedience and servitude, and that's not in the in old property language, but just understanding how things are done biblically. So that's a conversation for another day. But can two walk together unless they agree? So what is your romance table? So your romance table does matter as well. So the romance table can be anything, from what you believe romance is for you. It's very general, romance table as a question, but I guess it just depends upon uh the relationship. A lot of times if you get certain questions asked early, sometimes it's funny how we would rather engage in sexual um activity but not talk about what we like sexually. And we wait till we get into the marriage and the person wants this, right? And you want this, but neither one of you wants to uh, serve the other person. Uh, to give the other person what each person wants, right? If you get early what is romance for someone, what it means for that person, again, I think you would fare better. Also, though, you need to know I don't think you necessarily need to know someone's body count, but I do think you need to know what may be some sexual triggers, right? If a person is the type of person who's um has a porn addiction, or they masturbate, or they do a number of things outside of a relationship that has now become a crutch, that has now become a soothing mechanism for them, you're going to have issues with intimacy, because two partners are supposed to come together and be intimate with each other. You're no longer supposed to be intimate by yourself. And that goes back to the single argument. There are things that you did as a single individual, and then there are things you're going to do as a married individual, married person. And so when you're still activating certain strategies that kept you, however way they kept you when you were single, and you're trying to bring that into the marriage, there's going to be conflict. There's going to be immediate conflict. You're It doesn't make any sense to bring in porn from your single life into your married life. I understand that people do it, right? And they believe it spices up the marriage, all that kind of good stuff. The problem with that, though, is that the man, for example, who is watching porn, is connecting more with the two people who are doing porn or doing sex or having sex than the man is connecting with you. Just because he sees that and he watches that, and then now he wants to replicate it, mimic it, doesn't mean that he's being intimate with you. He's just replicating what he saw on the TV. And so then he gets into it. It becomes no different than the video games that men love to play. They want to replicate, especially when it comes to uh, basketball video games, um, wrestling video games, car racing video game, all those different type of video games, and all they're trying to do is mimic what they see on the screen outside of the screen. So then you acquiesce and you become a participating partner in his mimicry, but then you are left to your own devices to get you to a place where you can release. Whereas if you leave whatever it is that you use as a crutch prior to the relationship, to the marriage, if you leave that behind, kind of like a suitcase, you, or old clothes or anything, if you leave that behind and you come into the relationship ready and prepared to serve each other and love each other and be there for each other, be intimate with each other, then that's your romance. Your romance is not just going out once or twice a month on date night. It's not just coming home and cooking a special dinner, right? It's not just wearing a fancy negligee, right? Uh, See-through negligee. It's not just having a stripper pole in the house. It's not. That's not completely romance. Romance. What is your romance table? Really hints at intimacy. What is your intimacy? Um, because a lot of times I notice that all of us, as frail and flawed human beings, will give everything, we'll give our all to people who don't care about us, who don't want to be with us, or people we don't care about and we don't want to be with. We'll give our all. We'll give them the very best. But then when we get the person that we really want to be with and love, or we feel like that we love, we tend to be shy. We don't want to give everything. We are offended that the person is asking of us to do that. It's so many, things that go with that. And I just think to myself, so you did all this over here with this person for 2 years, 8 years, or whatever, and here it is, you're married, and you don't want to do it with your husband because you left your intimacy on the porn TV, or you left your intimacy on the with the old partner, or you left your intimacy when you used to serve yourself, so to speak, right? That's where you left your intimacy. Your intimacy no longer, you don't feel like you need to be intimate with now a marital partner. That's strange. I don't know why we think that way, but it's interesting that we would rather spend all our time over here in one thing over here and give it our best. I mean, give it our best. Give it our best time, give it our best money, give it our best body, give our, I mean, our very, they're going to get 100. It's not going to be 100%. It's going to be 200%. But when we get over here in a marriage, we barely give anything. It's almost like we are offended at having to leave the intimacy that we built in one area of our life to now create intimacy in another area of our life. It's kind of like, what's a good example? A good example would be um, a partner and a you have a marriage, husband, wife. Husband decides to cheat, and the mistress is saying that the husband has a duty to her, not the wife. And the more that the wife um asks for consideration as a wife and for him to make a decision, it's almost like the husband is offended that the wife is asking him to perform husband duties to her as a wife, and that he's already created in his mind that he should serve intimacy to his mistress, and that she's more deserving, and that he has a duty more to her. He's offended at it. And that's what happens, that we have married ourselves to something else that we did prior to the relationship. We've married ourselves. It can be marriage to masturbation. It can be marriage to porn. It can be marriage to situationships. It can be marriage to an ex-partner who no longer wants us, right? It can be marriage to an idea that we really wanted to be with that person over there, but that person is no longer available. It can be it could be whatever it is that you feel like you have more loyalty to and duty to, that you hold that in higher regard. versus now you're in a marriage and you don't feel like that the person that you're with, who you're with, is deserving of you 100%. And you are offended that the person is asking you to have a duty towards them, right? The guy that I was in relationship with, he was in some kind of relationship with me, but his ex, who wouldn't take him back, kept saying to him that he had a duty to her and not me, even though she had already made a decision in her mind that she was not going to be with him anymore. She still felt like he had a duty to her. So it was like he felt offended at me asking for him to be a partner to me, and he felt more of a duty to serve her and give her what she wants. And so you have your romance table, you really got to get a good understanding of what's going on. That means you are really addressing you. It's not so much as the outside performer of you. It is the inside understanding of you and what you believe romance is for you. So, what is your romance table? What is your education and career table? So that goes back to um, where you're going to take yourself, your preparation, right? So you know you're going to need an education. There's no way around it. Whether you go the vocational education route or the college education route, regardless, you're going to need post high school um, education. So this is one of the questions that people that many of the men on social media are attacking women for. And the women are saying they have education, they have a career, they have a house, they have this, whatever. But the men, the so-called alpha men who are on these podcasts, feel like, okay, that doesn't matter. Most alpha men don't care about that, things like that. But it is my urgent um, urgent desire and request that you continue on doing what it is that you're doing, because if you need an education, you need post high school knowledge in order for you to operate. And when you have people who ask these types of questions, there's a lot more insecurity in that question, in asking that question, because anyone who already has an education or has some, you don't see them having a problem with it. You don't see them being skeptical and mocking and sarcastic and hostile and disrespectful. So usually the person who asking this question is the type of person who doesn't have what it is that he is asking or she is asking, because uh, looking down on someone's education, it's just strange that you would do that in 2023 when career fields and industries are becoming very specialized. It's like asking someone, why do you have a tech degree? So what? Okay, you have a computer science degree, you have a information systems degree, because that's where we are, that's where we're going. Now we have this issue with AI, and so how is it in digital online learning and remote work and things like that? And so now there are certifications for that. Okay, so how are you going to tell somebody that, okay, you don't need all that, you just be a good person, okay, just go get a good job. Many of those jobs are turning into robot jobs as well. Some things are not going to be accessible to you like they were many years ago. So you have to change with the times, and that's what that basically means. Even if you're already in your Even if you've already completed your education and you are already in your career, there's still this idea that you have to improve, you know, stay abreast of new technologies, stay abreast of your field, your industry. What should you be learning? What should you know? Where do you want to go with yourself? Do you need an advanced degree in order for you to have an administrative position? That's your table. That should be everyone's table. So then the question becomes, the person who has a problem with that table, the fact that you have that table, you come to the table with an education, with a career, you come to the table like that. So then why are you then choosing someone who doesn't believe in that? This is what you see a lot of times with women who are very um, career driven, have high education, etc. They pick people who don't. They pick men who don't have the education, or they pick men who don't keep a job, or they pick men who don't have a career, or they pick men just who keeps going in and out of jail. They keep picking men who don't look like them. And so education and career, or education and job stability, should be every person's, every 100% adult, every 100% responsible adult goal. That's a that is a life goal. That is not something that is negotiable. That's not something that is optional. You can't live with your parents forever. So that means that if you don't get an education, or if you don't get a career, or if you don't get sustainable work where you stay on the job for 10, 15, 20 years or more and move up, then you're going to end up homeless, or you're going to end up having to live with people, or you're going to end up, it's all the people, I say this all the time, it's all the people who say you don't need this and just live for the day, who always end up needing money from you, and who always end up coming, uh, having to come live with you. Those are always those individuals. And so when you are having to deal with someone who is questioning whether or not you have the right to pursue what you want to pursue, that's something that you have to ask at the table. Because if you really want to waste your life, waste your life with someone who doesn't think the same way you do, just ask them about the education question. Ask them about the career question, because it's very easy to do. It's extremely easy to do. So when you're thinking about the career table, and asking that question, that's a question. And what are their plans? What plans do they have? So if they don't have what they have right now, what are the plans that they need to adopt? Because we're looking to be together for how many years? 10, 15, 20, 25 years, hopefully to death do us part. And you don't know if you need to get an education or not. You don't know if you need to pursue some sort of vocational education. You don't know if you need to pursue a sustainable business, anything. And if they don't have an answer for you, then that's a table that you have to reconsider. That is not the right table for you, because if you have something and they don't have something, it's going to create conflict. It's going to create insecurity. So, what is your education and career table? What is your life assignment table? So, this is something that is not always a thing that people understand. But your life assignment, your assignment is usually to a person, people, or thing, and it's usually a problem that you're going to solve during your time on the earth. When you think about Queen Elizabeth, and I've been using her lately, even in my classroom. When you think about Queen Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth really wasn't supposed to become queen. Her uncle decided to abdicate the throne, which forced her to take on the role as queen. And so then once she accepted the mantle, once she accepted the task of being queen, she died off the job. She literally died off the job. Her assignment was to become queen, stabilize the country, bring everybody united, up under the flag, up under the country's ideals, right, and purpose. And she stayed on the throne for like 70 years, I think, and she died. You're either whatever your life assignment is, it's either you're going to do that for a season and pass the baton, like you see the runners on the relay races passing the baton. Either you're going to do that, or you're going to die off the job, like Queen Elizabeth. And she stayed on the job. She never wavered. She stayed on it. She never quit. She never said, I didn't want to do this anymore. There were scandals. There were all different types of stuff, but she stayed the course. So your life assignment is something usually connected to people you're going to serve, or a place, a geography, whatever it is. I always remember this, and I learned this from a preacher, minister, Dr. Mike Murdoch of the Wisdom Center in Fort Worth, Texas. And he basically said, and I'm just kind of summarizing it in the way that I understand it. Where you are matters just as much as what you are. Where you are in terms of geography matters as much as what you are in terms of your gifts and talents. That you can have the right gift and talent, but be in the wrong place and nothing works. That okay, I feel like I can go on ahead and move from Dallas to Atlanta. Okay, everything is working well and functioning well where I am in Dallas. And just to be honest, I don't like Atlanta, so I would never move to Atlanta. But if I moved to Atlanta, I wouldn't have the success, or I wouldn't have the effectiveness, the productivity, what I need to accomplish in Atlanta, because what I'm supposed to accomplish is where I am right now. The healing that I'm going through is where I am right now. The books that I write is where I am right now. The teaching that I do as a college instructor, that's where I am right now. The place that I live in, that's where I am right now. I'm more effective here than I would be in another place. Um, just before I moved here, I was living in an extended stay motel, and I had stayed there from 2013 to about 2022, I think. And I was effective there. The goal was, I was just coming out of homelessness from the financial recession. I had lost everything, and I had become homeless. And so when I set the financial goal, I was able to get back on my teaching job in 2013. So I set a financial stable goal, that my goal is to become financially stable. So I stayed on the job, I taught, I did whatever I needed to do. I paid bills, I kept a place, albeit extended stay. And then that opened the door for me in 2022 to get an apartment again. And so now the goal, the financial goal, is to become financially financially well. I say financially well. Financial stability, financial wellness, and then financial freedom much later in life. And so financially well means that you must be ill somewhere. Now I'm not ill like I was before, but I feel like I'm still not where I need to be. And where I need to be is to where I am, what I'm doing right now, creating emergency savings plans and things like that. And that's where I was ill, meaning that part of the reason why I had to endure that life setback was because of an instruction that I ignored in my 20s, when my mother was trying to get me to understand something that, well, no, not 20s, but in high school, when she was trying to get me to understand that if I don't save any money, all I'm going to do is have a closet full of clothes and no money saved. And I ignored that instruction, let time pass by, went to college, did well in college, and then a life setback happened with the financial recession. And those words that she said were the very same words that ring in my head and in my heart. So the very thing that I ignored, I ended up having to be set back, go through correction, and now I'm living out those words, meaning that I'm living them out in the positive sense that I have a savings plan. I actually have money in the bank. If something happened to me, I can pay for myself. I can do a lot more now at 48 that I didn't do when I was in high school, 16, 17, 18 years old, right? So I say that to say that something that you didn't do in one area could affect what you need to do with your life assignment, that you could be in setback. As much as you can still accomplish your life assignment, some decisions that you have made in other areas could have an impact on what you're trying to do now. Case in point, when I got out of a situation that was um, um, kind of domestic violence back when I was like 20, 21 or something. Instead of taking the time to heal, I got into another relationship. And that was somewhere like 2021. Okay. And I remember feeling like I needed to not be in anything, but I got distracted. I met somebody at the mall, got distracted, and then I found myself in a relationship. And then that relationship turned kind of sour, almost deadly. Um, and then time just kind of passed by. I was out of that relationship, and time just passed by. Doesn't mean, even though time is passing by, doesn't necessarily mean that you're learning. It's just time is passing by. Now at 48, that was at 2021. At 48, the very thing that I didn't do and endure or even initiate the healing process, I'm now forced to do. Now, I'm still preparing in my life assignment, which is the teaching and the writing. But I'm still kind of set back, not financially anymore, but set back from fully going after the assignment because of the healing that I need to do. It's I have to do it. There's no there's no option. Uh it has to happen because if I don't do the healing now, by the time I get down the road, it's going to have a negative impact on anything that I'm trying to do, anybody I'm trying to reach, and whatever I'm trying to accomplish. So your life assignment table, when you think about the decisions that you made, can have an impact on what it is you're trying to do. That's why some people, when things are not working out in one area, they'll jump off one path and go on to another path because they're seeking a win. They're seeking success. But then they stay on that path so long because they are getting success and doing very well, but they're miserable. They're miserable, and then you find them very rich with all the trappings of wealth, but they're also the types of people who are jumping out of a window of a skyscraper. These are the same people who thought that they would be happy with money or thought that they would be happy with success, but they were on a different path. And I always say this: if you see someone dying a tragedy of any kind, that means that they are out of order somewhere, that they were not supposed to be in that place. And so, your life assignment, it does matter who you connect yourself with, because if the person that you connect yourself with is very hasty and wants to pursue success and want to get a win, they're going to take you too fast. It'll look like support. It'll look like the person is really behind you and going to be great for you and things like that. But in actuality, they're taking you too fast, and their support is actually hindering you. It's not supporting you. And that's why you need to spend time with your preparation and life assignment, and taking time and spending time in prayer, and just spending time with yourself before you take on the task of a relationship, meaning that you need to discover your gifts and talents. A lot of times, putting those activating those gifts and talents within a college environment will allow you to develop and learn and get feedback. And then off to yourself in isolation, work on some projects, work on your book, work on your website, anything that you need to do that's in preparation for the life assignment. And then the more time that you spend with that, the more you understand. And the more you understand what it is that you're trying to accomplish, what kind of problem that you're trying to solve. So then when you're looking for a partner or a partner is looking for you, you should agree. You both the life assignment should bring you together as complementary souls, so to speak, or complementary gifts and talents that there's something on the inside of that person you need, and there's something on the inside of you that that person needs. And when you come together, you come together in agreement, you come together with singleness of mind, and now you can pursue purpose, pursue the life assignment, and do the will of God, right? Do the work of God, do God's work. And so, what is your life assignment as you prepare your table for engagement really does matter, or is really predicated on the vision that you have for your life, that you understand that another person has, and that you both are coming together to serve a larger vision. Again, Queen Elizabeth died off the job. Either you're going to solve the problem to the point that it's time to pass the baton, or you're going to solve the problem to the point that you die off the job. And she didn't die of tragedy or anything like that. She just died a natural death off the job. And so, is the person sitting in front of you, or the person you are considering or thinking about, do they have that potential to go the distance? Think about the relay race. You have what, 4 or 5 runners. Each person is waiting in their spot, and each person has to pass the baton to the next person. That person keeps running, then the next person, and they finish the relay. You have to gauge whether all those people who are participating in a race, you have to gauge their capacity, their willingness to follow the rules, their capacity and strength to endure the race, their capacity to wait their turn, to wait their turn. They don't run ahead of someone else who's already ahead on the track. They have their own individual turns, right? And so that's what your life assignment is: understanding your season, understanding your turn, and making sure that the person that you decide to marry has the same understanding, has the same vision, etc. So, what is your life assignment? Is it time to leave the table? So, this is really connected to rebound relationships, when you realize that you are a member of a affair, or something like that, and that, or you could be in a situation where it's no longer conducive. Your health is at stake, or your life is at stake, and it's just time to leave. That's just it. It's just time to leave. Long gone are the days that we continue to stay in relationships and places that we're not supposed to be in, just to endure it to our death. You can die in that relationship, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're supposed to be in that relationship. You can your marriage can be to death do you part, but you could also die an early death because you were never supposed to be in that relationship. So when you're thinking about, is it time to leave the table? I mean, that's a multifaceted question, because when you look at that question, you think about it, okay, if we don't agree on this particular thing, bringing back the kids example, then it's time to leave the table. It's not. It's not for you to sit at the table and try to convince the other person that the other person is wrong and they are closed-minded, and that they need to rethink and have some grace and have some mercy. I really want kids, and I know you want to, and once the baby is here, it'll be all right. No, it's time to leave the table. That's it. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make the other person a bad person. It just suggests that you both don't agree on this particular thing. And it's not, and it's a deal breaker. And that's one of the things that's very hard, extremely hard to come to. It's a deal breaker. So when you're sitting at the table trying to determine if it's time to leave the table or exit the table, you look at your deal breakers. You take out a sheet of paper, you list what will be a deal breaker. Cheating would be a deal breaker for me. Cheating. Because I'm good to you. I'm good to you. I love you. I want to be with you. And I'm not cheating on you. So why should I have to put up with you cheating on me? And that's a very tricky thing, because what if the person, quote unquote, makes a mistake and that person never cheats ever again? You could be, giving up on a person um, uh, who may have a change of heart. At the same time, if a person was willing to cheat on you, given what they claim you supposed to mean to them, and they still cheated on you, you were still good to them, I have to wonder if they're actually going to not cheat again. You would have to in order for that to not happen, you would have to repent. You'd have to get your vision from the Lord about your marriage. You would have to obey God. You'd have to put God's needs first. You'd have to be in that kind of mindset to put God's needs first. And anytime you are confronted with temptation to cheat, that you have a strategy. You've gone to therapy, you get in your Bible, you read some books, you journal, you write a book, you do a number of things that suggests to a person, I no longer want to live a cheating lifestyle. I don't want to pursue cheating. I want to pursue romantic relationship stability. Then, there may be an exception to the rule. It may be an exception to the rule. But whatever deal breakers you have to make sure that you are prepared to stand by them. Because what if you love the person? What if you want to? What if you want the marriage, and then you stay in the marriage, and then 3 years, 3 to 5 years on down the road, he's cheating again, or she's cheating again? You know, it depends on what the deal. Some cheating may not be a deal breaker for some people. A person who does drugs may be a deal breaker. A person who becomes an alcoholic. A deal breaker for some people could be the health of the partner. If the partner gets sick, there was a recent report of a billionaire, I think, or something. His wife contracted, I don't know, like dementia or Alzheimer's or whatever. He decided to divorce her and get with some younger person who didn't have that disease or something, right? And so that's one of those things you got to ask. In 2023, you got to ask questions. If I get diabetes and I lose a limb, are you going to stay with me? If I get cancer, I think she got cancer. If I get cancer and there's no telling how long I'm going to have cancer, are you going to stay with me? If I have a heart attack, right? And it's a bad heart attack or stroke, and I may lose some functioning in my body, in my mind, or something like that, or are you going to stay with me? If I lose my mind, or are you going to stay with me? There's some things you may have to do that are connected to their health. For instance, you may have to put somebody in a home or nursing home because of the types of machines that person has to have and you can't have in the house, right? For regulation purposes. We're not talking about that, right? But if you sit at the table and you talk about, okay, well, what if this and what if that and what if this, that's not being paranoid. That's being cautious. That's exercising caution. That's exercising understanding about the what ifs, because they can happen. If I get in a car wreck, no fault of my own, and someone hits me and I become paralyzed, are you prepared, or do you think you will stay with me? You got to answer that question honestly. You can't be afraid to answer that type of question. No, I would not. I really wouldn't. I prefer to not have to deal with that. Okay, and then you take that person at their word. You don't try to change and say, well, it's something else and they really believe this and I think we can do it and I think we can hang on. No. If you don't, if you believe that you want a certain lifestyle in your life, you want a certain lifestyle in your life, and taking care of somebody who's ill is not going to fit that lifestyle for you, then you need to be honest with yourself. Don't waste that person's time. Don't let that person believe that you will be there for them when in actuality you know you're not going to be there for them. Right? So is it time to leave the table is something that you need to do before you get married. You shouldn't have to get married, endure the marriage, and then leave the table. No, you can leave the table prior to marriage. You can leave the table prior to you getting married. If you got a person who is not ready for marriage, it's time to leave the table. It doesn't make them a bad person. They're just not ready for marriage. If a person is not ready to commit to you, they have a cheating mindset, a cheating lifestyle, playboy mindset, playboy lifestyle. There's no sense in marrying them and producing a bunch of kids with them and then saying, well, maybe we should have waited. Maybe we should have made it. Maybe we should have done it. No, you knew from the very beginning that he didn't want marriage, or she didn't want marriage, or he was never going to give up his playboy lifestyle, or she was never going to give up her playgirl lifestyle. You knew that from the beginning. And so when you know these things from the beginning, there's no sense in trying to make someone be something or become something that the person doesn't want to become. So then you leave the table. You respectfully say that I cannot continue in this relationship because we don't agree on this particular thing. You don't let that person cry you back to change. Don't let that person manipulate you back to change. Don't let that person try to lie to you back to change. No, you said this is a deal breaker for me, it's a deal breaker for you, then we need to exit, we need to leave the table. That's a very hard thing to do. It's a very hard thing to do because people don't leave tables simply out of their reasoning behind investment. I've made an investment. We've been at this for 6 months, we've been at this for 8 months, we've been at this for 9 months, 10 months, 2 years, 5 years. I don't want to leave the table. But you can guard your heart and preserve your heart and guard against making a dreadful decision if you exit and leave the table early enough. And then you won't have all that heartbreak. Some heartbreaks can affect you so bad that it affects you mentally. It affects you um, health wise. It affects you in such ways that you never would have thought would happen. So, is it time to leave the table? So, these are the toxic encounter books that I mentioned earlier. This is Toxic Encounters: Why People Pursue Rebound Relationships, Part One. Then Toxic Encounters: Adult Attachment and the Problem with Rebounding, Part Two. And then Toxic Encounters: Why You Should Go No Contact Post Rebounding, Part Three. So this is part of the Overcoming Rebound Relationship curriculum, and these were the three initial books in terms of research where I go over um, rebound relationships, how it relates to adult attachment, and that's why we tend to stay in those types of relationships because we become attached. Is usually an insecure attachment, and you can chart the insecure attachment from your childhood to your adulthood. Then, of course, going no contact. Visit, subscribe, and follow. So this is the standard logo for the Regina White Favors website. And so you can also visit me on Facebook, Arthur Regina White Favors, YouTube, Regina White Favors channel, and then our Amazon Arthur page, amazon.com /Arthur Regina White Favors. Thank you very much for listening.